Hey, hi, Rabbi Barton. What's news, neighbor? Uh, and thanks for being on today to talk to the Waveland Park community a little bit about what is going on with Tiferith Israel Synagogue, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, first, maybe introduce yourself just a moment, if you would, please, and how long you've been with the community and what your role is as a rabbi.
Okay. I have been here since July of 17. So this is my fourth year, or I guess I'm in my fourth year. And I just re-signed another contract. We do it in contracts. So I will be here for another 3 years at least. So, yeah, so I moved here in July of 2017. And I am the rabbi of the synagogue. And rabbi actually in Hebrew means teacher. So I have kind of a bunch of different hats. I'm the spiritual leader of the synagogue, so I lead services, give sermons, do life cycle events, all of that kind of stuff. And then I also in Judaism we have like a Jewish law component, so I make sure that the synagogue and the community, at least our community, like that we have a kosher kitchen and that we have we observe the Sabbath in a certain way according to traditional Jewish law. And then I also am like the CEO of the synagogue, at least that's what the board calls me. I have a board of trustees that I answer to. And I have a board president and kind of all of that system, but I, am technically the supervisor of my personnel and make sure that we have programming and work with the committees to make sure that we have programming and events and all of that kind of stuff as well. So it's a big job. But and like I said, a lot of different hats. So yeah, I teach religious school, like all different kinds of things. So
how big is the community?
So we count our communities, Jewish communities tend to count our communities by families. We have member units. So a member unit could be one person, or it could be a family with 5 children, which we have in this community, right? So we have about 225 member units, but that translates more to like 500 or 600 people, maybe more like 600 people that belong to the synagogue. And that means here that you pay dues, like an annual dues. And we might have other people who come, but people who are members of our synagogue, kind of pay in at some kind of annual rate or monthly rate or something like that, or they give to the synagogue.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah,
it's different than churches. I know I always have to feel like I have to kind of explain it because it's like different than churches. When I talk to my non-Jewish clergy friends, it's like explaining some of this stuff is like, like a little bit complicated. So
well, and you know what? I'm a clean slate of ignorance. I mean, what I don't know is so vast. So I'm going to probably ask some of the dumb questions, but having lived in this community, having lived in the Waveland Park neighborhood 30 plus years, it's about time I should know a little bit about my neighbor, Tiferith,
Yeah.
So just, but first I want to acknowledge, just again, thank you for your time today. We're going to be quick. I'm going to want to get on as many questions in as I can.
Sure.
Because you wear a lot of hats, and we had to schedule this, and you've been quite busy.
Well, thank you.
Some holidays, right? For
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we just finished about a month of holidays. The big Jewish holidays are in the fall. We're on the Jewish calendar is kind of a lunar, sort of semi-lunar calendar. Passover in the Torah we're told that it has to be in the spring. So it goes on the basis of the moon, and we have different Hebrew Jewish months. And so we kind of rotate. So Islam is totally on a lunar calendar, but like I said, because we have to have Passover in the spring, we do as much as we can lunar. And then as things get earlier and earlier, then kind of there's an adjustment made and we add an extra month to the calendar. But generally the fall holidays is complicated. I probably shouldn't have gone into all of that, but generally the fall holidays fall sometime between early September and October. This year they started the 18th of September. But last year, Rosh Hashanah, which is the first one of the fall holidays, fell on October 4th, I believe. So it really, like, it's a, so it depends. But yes, we just finished a couple of weeks ago, actually, our last Jewish holiday. We have first Rosh Hashanah, and we have Yom Kippur 10 days later, and then we have a holiday called Sukkot, where we build kind of a temporary structure, which we don't have anymore in the front of the synagogue, but we did. And you're supposed to eat your meals out there. Some people sleep in it, but you're supposed to have enough roofing that's natural material, that you have enough more shade than sun, but you can still see the stars. And it's supposed to remind us from the Torah, from the Bible, of when the Israelites, when they left Egypt, they dwelt in temporary structures and were protected by God. So it's kind of supposed to remind you of the ephemeralness of life and how short it is and how vulnerable we are. And especially when you live in places that aren't Israel, where it's still warm in October, and you live in a place like the Midwest. This year we had a beautiful Sukkot. It was still very warm, but if Sukkot had been like this week, it would have been pretty cold. But that's the last of the fall holidays. It lasts 8 days. And between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot is about a month. But it's a whole other world that most, I think, non-Jewish people have no idea is happening.
No idea.
And I
never know, wish any of my Jewish friends a happy whatever, because I'm like, oh, that's a holiday? Okay, I did not know.
and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, or Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are two of the most important holidays in the year. It's basically for us like having Christmas and Easter back to back. So if you imagine having Christmas and Easter 10 days apart, it's crazy, crazy busy. But it's very, I think most non-Jewish people don't even think about it. They mostly probably think about Hanukkah, which is actually a minor holiday on the Jewish calendar, but because of its proximity to Christmas, most people who are not Jewish think it's really, really important and offer like days off for work and stuff when I used to not work as a rabbi. And I would be like, well, what I really need off is the holidays in the fall, but they don't quite make the connection because, they're working off of their calendar.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of the holidays in the fall, we have commandments not to work, and the synagogue is closed, and all that stuff. And we had less events this year because of COVID, but normally it's a really busy time for us.
Right. Okay. Now, and I had to Google this and I had to ask my Jewish friends. I'm like, they're like my tokens to explain.
It's okay. You always need those, especially in this community. There aren't that many of us.
Right. So you're a conservative community, is that correct? Okay. Because I was wondering, so we have a delicatessen down the street that's a neighbor, and that's kosher food. So your community is more likely to, okay, very important to you. Okay.
Well, right. we're more like, so we keep kosher in the synagogue.
Okay.
What
all
people
right.
do in their own homes is their own business.
You don't judge, right?
Don't judge. That's for the big guy in the sky, not me.
Okay.
So, but the synagogue keeps a kosher kitchen. Yeah, we have probably one of the only fully kosher kitchens left in the state, I would say, besides the gentleman down the street. And then the Iowa Jewish Life Center is right next to us, which is a skilled nursing facility.
Yes, and I'm going to ask about that in just a moment. So I want to talk a little bit about the structure and kind of the history of the structure of the building and everything like that. Because to the outsider looking in, that's the one thing I notice, right? A lot. So I go by and so I want to go back, way back, and take me back to when there was another building that was in front of the current building. When did that happen and why?
So we were actually trying to figure that out. We were trying to figure out exactly when, and since I wasn't here then, it's like coming back through this stuff. So I think it was approximately, finished approximately 10 years ago. And
seems longer, okay.
But it might be longer. It might be longer by a few years.
And why did that happen? I mean, was the old structure it just needed too much work, and so it was just better to start fresh?
So this is actually, so they basically, I'm saying this is recorded, so I have to try to figure out how to say this. So basically, my understanding of what happened was the original large sanctuary that they had in the front that went basically to the sidewalk, it was badly in need of repair, and it was going to be very expensive to fix. And it was going to be less expensive, ironically, to demolish it and remodel what we had already, because this was my understanding is this was a huge complex. I mean, it's just like lots of different stuff. So it was actually less money to, and more reasonable, kind of given the size of the Jewish community. People had, at that point, there, a lot of people had moved away for, people's children had moved away for college and hadn't come back and were living in like Chicago and Kansas City and other places. And so they weren't living here. And so I think that there was kind of a sense in the community that they needed a more manageable building, and it was going to be more affordable to kind of scale back a little bit. And then they also renovated very beautifully the remaining building so that it was much more functional.
And I've seen it maybe once or twice. I've been in the building for some function, and it is a beautiful building, and you have a lot of beautiful artwork and that sort of thing. So, okay, well, that explains that, because I remember being sad just because it was a beautiful facade, and it certainly looked old, and I like old. So I was sad to see it go. But what's there now is compelling. It's the structure's back there, and then you have sort of these glass sort of screens that are up, and that's interesting. Now let's talk a little bit about what goes on around the building. So your building has a round in the back of it, and then there's some animals back there that I've always find really fun or whimsical. And I think that those maybe are related to the school. Maybe I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, but
yeah, and about the same time that the building was being kind of reworked, they decided to transfer the school, the religious school, out to Waukee, because we have a Greater Des Moines Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines. There we go. And that's out in Waukee. And basically we've had a community religious school, so like a supplementary school, Wednesdays and Sundays. And we've had that, and I think there used to be an extra day several years ago, like when my contemporary age people were children. If you went to this synagogue, that used to be, Hebrew school used to be 3 days a week. But they used to schlep the kids, like move the kids between the temple on Grand, our synagogue, and the Orthodox synagogue. They used to change it every couple of years and move everybody around, pack up all the desks, all the books, everything, and put the different kids in the different school wings. And then when and the temple on Grand, which I don't think is technically part of Waveland, they also have done a big remodel as well. And got rid of their school wing. But about the same time that our building was getting redone, the Federation built a beautiful campus out in Waukee on a bunch of land, and they put the school there. So we didn't need a school wing anymore. So you're right, the animals were part of the school wing, and we just kept them because they're cute.
The question I wanted to get to that is, how big is the community? Given that there's different, is it safe to say that?
Denominations is probably what I would say. Denominations.
Okay. Give me a Protestant word I can use there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So how big is the community right now in Des Moines?
I would say people give you different numbers. I would say maybe 3,000 to 5,000 Jews. That's broad, but it depends on how people count themselves.
Sure.
I think the highest I've heard is 5,000 Jews. That's, I mean, given the fact that the population of Greater Des Moines is like 600,000 people, like we are like, tiny. But I would say, yeah, that's probably about right.
As I said, just in finishing up here, you provide a lot of information, and I really appreciate it. So what's the latest news going on with the community? Just got through with the fall holidays then. But what's coming? What's top of mind for your community? What's going on these days? Anything you want to talk about real quick?
Well, I think we're a little bit nervous about the election, whatever the outcome is. We've seen, I mean, if that's like the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, I have other things, like we have a lot of cool adult ed stuff coming down the pike for the community just in November
Sure.
for whatever reason. But I think like if you're looking at it from a community perspective, I think whenever there's tension in a country, any country, Jews don't fare particularly well.
Yeah,
So
true.
I think there's a lot of anxiety. You know, anti-Semitism has been on the rise in the past few years. So I think there's quite a bit of anxiety about what will happen either way, and kind of what the future will look like. And you know, we have done pretty well in Des Moines. We don't really have any issues in that regard, but we watch everything else fairly carefully. And you know, some people who might watch this, or maybe even you, we had a big vigil. You know, this is the anniversary of the massacre in Pittsburgh. So there's, you know, we think about those things a lot, and are worried. And you know, I hear from security people that we have to start really thinking about, you know, protecting ourselves around the time of the election because of social unrest. And like I said, that doesn't usually, this is like not a happy thing to say, but it doesn't usually pan out well for us. For some reason, and I can't explain it, and it makes me very sad, but I don't think any Jew can really explain it. We can look at history, but we still don't understand why people have a difficult time with us. We're just trying to follow God the way we believe we should follow God, and we try to stay out of other people's stuff and do our own thing. And yet, you know, there are people who have all kinds of false information about Jewish people. And
Yeah, and that is sad. Well, we'll all have to be vigilant as neighbors, right? So in closing, Rabbi Barton, what can you tell me as a person who knows so little about your faith, and people who just want to be a good neighbor? What can we do to be a good neighbor, even if we're not a member of your community?
Oh, well, I think just like all good neighbors, we should look out for each other, right? So, you know, if people live near the synagogue, and they know it as their neighbor because their house is by us, you know, to kind of keep an eye out if they see something suspicious and like let us know. But you know, that just that everybody should know that we want to be your good neighbor, and if there are things that we can do as your neighbor to support, you know, ongoing activities or issues, then we want to be able to do that. And that if people could just do the same for us, I think we would appreciate it, and just look out for us, and we'll try our best to look out for you.
That sounds great. Well, I appreciate your time today, and I definitely want to be a good neighbor. I appreciate that you guys are here doing what you do. You provide a beautiful view, and I know that you have people of faith, and I know you're doing what you can to be good people as well.